And I am your host for today, and I'm very excited to guide you through this exploration of AI and the ever-evolving landscape. And I'm joined by our innovation leads, Ed and Andy, as you can see. And what a journey this has been so far. Like everyone else at the beginning, we were a little bit apprehensive about what was to come. And we have the added pressure that we're a digital agency, so we're supposed to be confident and infallible in all of these things. But we were a bit scared. If this new tech could do everything that people were saying it could, then we were a little bit worried we might become redundant. But through lots of collaboration and even more hands-on experiments led by Ed and Andy, we have been able to foster a culture where AI is not just a novelty anymore, it's actually a part of our workflows. And 93% of the team at Torchbox is now using AI in some way or another. Thank you to everyone that completed our survey to let us know about adopting AI at your organizations. The results showed a spectrum of sentiments ranging from keen optimism to cautious skepticism, which is to be expected. And it appears that leadership for AI is distributed among various teams, so digital, the senior leadership team, and strategy. And progress in AI adoption is mixed. So some organizations are advancing well, while others are lagging behind. And usually the challenges are lack of strategic emphasis or resources or expertise, alongside just general internal resistance as well. But nevertheless, there was a strong consensus from everybody that on the AI's promise for enhancing operational efficiencies, customer engagement, and administrative functions as well. So our innovation leads at Torchbox are your speakers for today, so Ed and Andy, and they have been amazing at guiding us through this journey so far, and they've now embarked on various AI projects with our clients too. And today they are going to demystify AI for you. They're going to showcase some groundbreaking use cases across various sectors, so from refreshing the branding of Coca-Cola to aiding noble causes like Dogs Trust. And they will also share some of our recent projects for clients such as RNIB. So our goal for this webinar is not just to spark inspiration, but we'd really love to change your perspective on what's possible with AI for your organization. So let's get going. I'm sure you're going to have lots of questions. We are going to save them for the end, just so that Ed and Andy can focus on what they're doing and where they are in the presentation. So I'm going to keep an eye on all of the chat and we will ask them live. For any that we miss, I'll make sure that we do follow up and answer them after. So I will be sharing the recording with you, as well as any of the links or resources that Ed and Andy referenced during the discussion as well. And I think that's it. If you need live transcript, I think you can enable that as well. I am going to hand over to Ed to kick things off.
Thanks, Lisa. Super excited to be here with you all for the next hour, well, 55 minutes now. A really quick overview of what we're looking at before I hand across to Andy. We will be talking about the AI hype roller coaster, so where we have been since GPT 3.5 was released, and the journey that took us to here, where the value is now that we can see beyond the hype, what's the value being created for different organizations, how you can set a clear direction, and how you can then engage with this AI transformation that is coming for us all, whether we like it or not. And then, of course, as Lisa says, we'll have time for some questions and answers, and any that we don't get to within the session, we'll do our best to answer on email following up. So don't worry, we won't miss any of them. Andy, I'll hand across to you to start us.
Perfect. Thanks very much, Ed. So before Ed goes a little bit further into the AI roller coaster over the past 12 months, it would be helpful to take a step back and understand the bigger AI picture. So AI is a pretty broad brushstroke. It covers a lot more than just generative AI that's been a huge focus of the news more recently. There hasn't been a shared consensus around the definition since John McCarthy first coined it in the 50s as the science and engineering of making intelligent machines. But we've come a long way since. So you can think of AI as the discipline or an umbrella term, a bit like physics or history. And it's everything from machines being able to learn and adapt, understand language, speak, see, plan, schedule, automate tasks, and emulate deep expertise. So to get to where we are today, there's been really 4 big booms in AI. The first one was the 50s to the 80s, and this was all around machines doing sophisticated rule-based tasks, so things like checkers, traffic lights, and algebra. The next boom was the 80s to roughly 2010, and this was machines that could learn without explicit instruction. So a couple of notable examples of this was IBM's Deep Blue in 1997. This was a landmark event in AI, where Deep Blue, a computer system specifically designed to play chess, beat the world chess champion Garry Kasparov. And the other was the Netflix prize prediction. So this was the Netflix prize competition that spurred innovation in collaborative filtering and recommendation systems, but ultimately improved prediction accuracy. The next, and as a subset of machine learning, is something called deep learning. And this was enabling machines to do much more complex tasks like pattern recognition and predictions. This was enabled by something called neural networks, which I'll unpack in a moment. A couple of famous examples here were Google X's cat experiment, where they released their artificial brain at the time, which was made up of 16,000 computers, onto YouTube with the goal of learning. Over 3 days, it scoured YouTube. What did it learn? To recognize and categorize cats. Probably tells you a little bit more about our society than the machines themselves, but it did learn. And the other breakthrough was something called the transformer model, or the T in ChatGPT. So this transformer model was such a big breakthrough because it ultimately allowed us to recognize, or machines, not us, to recognize and predict any repeating motives or patterns. So anything from pixels through to code, music, DNA, and text. And there was a plethora of different tools that could allow you to do that. So some of the tools that we'll reference throughout the webinar today will be things like Midjourney and DALL-E, which are image generators, GitHub Copilot, which is for code, as well as ChatGPT and other large language models. So before, you had specialized models for things like summarization, translation, search, and retrieval, and the transformer model unified all of those into a single structure capable of a huge variety of tasks, which we'll unpack today. And that kind of gave birth to generative AI, or the boom that we're in now. So generative AI is this class of technology that can generate new content based on patterns and structures learned from the data set. The data set, we're talking hundreds of millions of images and billions of words. And by content, that's quite broad. So on the left-hand side is an example of an image. It was the winner of the Sony Photograph Awards. It's called The Electrician. And this was kind of an award judged by expert photographers. Berlin-based photographer Boris Elgerson, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, actually turned down their award because this was created with DALL-E 2, an image generator. So it just shows you how capable these models are. The top right-hand corner is an example of code. So you can create code now. So this is GitHub Copilot, and you can use AI to suggest entire functions in real time, all the way through to music. So the Beatles recently released their final Beatles song, Now and Then, and it was released with John Lennon's vocals, all enabled by AI. Other examples of content are things on the top left. We can now create DNA and protein structures. And there's other healthcare companies creating new drug molecules. On the bottom left-hand side, we've got an example here of, from a few images or from text, we can now create 3D models. And no kind of AI webinar would be complete without some sort of fake image. We opted not for Pope in a coat, and we went for an Obama and Merkel eating an ice cream on the beach. So that's what we mean by content. So these models use, as I mentioned earlier, neural networks, which mimic how our brains learn and understand to identify patterns and structures in order to create that new content. I'm going to pass across to Ed now to talk a little bit about the roller coaster of the past 12 months.
The roller coaster, thanks, Andy. So as Andy's kind of gone through, AI has been happening in the background quite slowly, and then suddenly it was happening all at once to everybody, right? So this time last year, OpenAI made GPT 3.5 suddenly incredibly accessible by releasing ChatGPT. And it was followed in everyone's consciousness very shortly afterwards by Anthropic releasing Claude, Google catching up with Palm, Meta getting in the game with Llama, and then image generators like Midjourney, Runway, DALL-E 3, which is another OpenAI product. And we've been talking about this as the Netscape moment. The internet predated Netscape, it predated, the World Wide Web predated Netscape, but suddenly when Netscape was released, everyone could see what the World Wide Web was. Generative AI has been going on for years now. Lots of us have been involved with it for years, saying how amazing it's going to be and how transformational it will all appear when people are using it. ChatGPT was what enabled everybody else to see what we had been working on for all of this time. And the hype was huge, right? MIT released a report saying that we were going to see productivity levels increase by 50%. We saw huge amounts of investment going into it, and we saw every single human apparently on the internet telling all the other humans how it was that they needed to use AI. Whether they had been using it for a long time or not, everybody suddenly became an expert. And there was this idea, and Lisa alluded to it at the top of the webinar, that it would be this magic silver bullet and organizations like Torchbox wouldn't need to exist anymore because all problems could be instantly, painlessly solved for everybody. And of course, spoiler alert, this was not what happened. And the roller coaster started going down swiftly as people realized the hype maybe wasn't quite as big as we had made out. The National Eating Disorder Association decided to fire their helpline team and replace it with generative AI chatbot who started talking in harmful ways to people with eating disorders. Some lawyers decided to take some shortcuts and ask ChatGPT if they could help to produce some legal documents, which again, did not go so well. We started to be able to see very clearly the biases within these models. So this is a series of images that have been generated by Midjourney. They show housekeepers that are very stereotypical. They only showing women, showing people of color. You know, all of the biases that exist within human society are being encapsulated within these large language models. Likewise, when it comes to text generators, this is quite hard to follow in the context of a webinar, but this is somebody who has asked about the grammar of a sentence, and GPT 3.5 is refusing to accept the grammar of the sentence because it will not accept that an attorney is a female whilst the paralegal is a male because of the hierarchy implicit in that. This has been improved on over the last year, but the latent bias that exists within these models was starting to become clear to all. Authors, artists, and other creatives started suing Microsoft, OpenAI, and other people for copyright infringement. Samsung leaked a whole bunch of things they did not want to leak. And the lack of transparency inherent of neural networks started to become public, common knowledge that everyone was aware of. Neural networks are very unobservable. We don't understand, nobody understands why neural networks make certain decisions at certain points in time. It's part of the difficulty of tracking decisions that are made by large language models. We here at Torchbox have been talking about the ethics, about the frameworks to make our interaction with large language models as safe as possible since the beginning. And we've come up with 3 top-level principles that we've been working to. One of them is machine in the middle. So we want to make sure that people are always involved in the conversation. No autonomous GPT agents that are going around in the world doing whatever it is they're doing. But also importantly, it means that not allowing people necessarily to interface directly with large language models if they're an end user. So making sure that if there is a risk that is above 0, that we make sure that we remove that risk. We have clear guardrails and governance, and we make sure that we're upskilling everybody in the team. So learning and development is a critical part of working with AI and making sure that we transform our organizations in safe, responsible ways that actually leads to value being created for the people who are important, which are end users and the people that we work with on a day-to-day basis. the roller coaster analogy or metaphor is not one that we've come up with here at Torchbox, right? This is Gartner. Gartner has had their hype cycle since the mid-90s. And the peak of inflated expectations had generative AI at the very top of it at the beginning of this year. Importantly, why I'm showing this, this diagram, this image, is because we can see that generative AI is not alone. That it's not one AI technology here. It is an ecosystem of AI technologies, which are all increasing capabilities of one another. So, you know, computer vision is now very well established. We use it, lots of organizations, including Torchbox, use it on a day-to-day basis. It increases the capabilities of generative AI, and generative AI is increasing the capabilities of computer vision. And what's going to be fascinating in the coming years, even if none of these technologies improve, mushing them together and figuring out what new things can be created with them is going to lead us to really new and interesting spaces. So I will let Andy tell you about some of the new possibilities that have been unlocked through people working with this over the last few months, years.
Just before we do that, I'd love to share a couple of videos of where we are now with artificial intelligence. So I'll share these here. So this first example is a more traditional or predictive artificial intelligence. And I don't know if many of you at home, I've got a 3-year-old and we've got a lot of Lego bricks. And this is an incredible tool where you can actually scan those Lego bricks. It'll allow you to, or it'll come and generate particular things that you can build, and also give you the instructions off the back of that. And this is an example of more traditional machine learning. But again, it's a really exciting example that we thought we'd share with you to just show you some of the capabilities.
Is that available now, Andy, if we want to download?
It is. Brick it. I think it's about, Ed downloaded it yesterday. I think it's about £6 a month. Is that right, Ed?
Something like that. It's worth it. It's worth every penny. Especially, I've got a 3-year-old and a 6-year-old, and the 3-year-old decided to pour all of the Lego of the 6-year-old out on the floor, trying to put it back together. Brick it helped a lot.
That's £6.
And this is now the multimodal capabilities of GPT-4. So you can upload images. This is an example of someone asking how to lower their bike seat. ChatGPT will give you a response. You can go, okay, is this the lever? Is that what you were referring to? And again, you can interact just like you would a conversation, but with images. And it's ChatGPT telling you successfully that it's not a lever. It's saying upload the manual and your toolbox, and I'll let you know exactly what you need to do and whether you've got the right tools. And again, the response is incredible. It tells you what, yes, you have the right tools and where in the toolbox to find them, which again just shows you how incredible these tools are and how quickly they're advancing. The next example is actually text to, well, we talked about text to image, but this is text to video. This is Runway, which is an AI video software and tool that you can use. And basically just adding a couple of prompts, you can see here that you can create waterfalls, desert oasis, grass in the wind, explode absolutely anything. And I think the last comment on here is actually really impactful, and it's around, if you can imagine it, you can generate it. And there's numerous different applications here that we potentially could see for nonprofits and charities. So I'll jump in now to a couple of examples of where we've seen value in a diverse range of applications. So some of these are going to be inside of the sector, and others will be outside the sector. So the first example is Just Giving. They've created a new feature inside of Just Giving called the Story Enhancer. And they found that fundraisers who write their own stories raise a huge amount more than those that don't. 65% more. But 35% of people still use the default story option. So the Just Giving has built in the capabilities of generative AI, specifically OpenAI's technology. And that allows you now to upload a bit of information on why you're raising money. On the left-hand side, you can analyze it, so how it sounds to others with their tone analysis feature. And then on the right-hand side, you can select how you want it to sound, whether that's empathetic, optimistic, casual, and then generative AI will rewrite the story based on that. And that's ultimately leading to increased fundraising efforts for thousands of charities and causes. The next example is something that we've worked on at Torchbox. So this is an internal tool for RNIB. And they found that they know that they've got an incredible amount and quality of content, but their frontline staff have varying levels of experience. But this data is essential for them to respond to queries live. So frontline staff need to find this information quickly and effectively, but it was quite challenging. So leveraging the capabilities of GPT-4, you can now ask a question. So something like, how can I adapt my home for sight loss? You'll get the answer. You can vote on the quality of that answer and provide feedback on it. But more importantly, we're also including the sources of truth, right? So we're cross-referencing the results with factual sources and these feedback mechanisms to ensure that it's giving the right information. The next example here is some climate cardinals. They're tackling the climate crisis. They're an international non-profit working to translate huge amounts of climate research and information. They found that the huge blocker to climate action was that much of this information is inaccessible to non-native speakers. So they're now using Google Cloud's new AI-powered translation hub platform, which allows them to translate hundreds of thousands of words into more than 40 languages. So in Central America, there's estimated around 1,000 women victims of murder as a result of gender-based violence. So the UNDP and the USAID are trying to tackle this. So they've got a dual intervention strategy where they're using AI's pattern spotting capabilities alongside a chatbot. So they monitor digital violence against women in real time on social media platforms. They identify attacks on public figures, including journalists, communicators, activists, and artists. And then they're taking action to intervene fast. So alongside this, they've also got Sarah, which is a digital assistant or a chatbot that provides information and advice on violence against women and girls, so bringing awareness to the issue. Don't know if anyone's ever tried to read the IPCC report, so the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. It's complicated and hugely overwhelming. So Chat Climate has tried to make this much more accessible. So you can ask questions about the report through conversational AI capabilities, helping you to find the information, also translate it to something that's easy to understand. Many of you will know well, but our media landscape is becoming increasingly fragmented, which makes non-profits and charities jobs quite difficult. There's also a trend around personalized content. So the BBC's been experimenting using AI to assist with creating versatile content for various different platforms, as well as how they distribute this. So they've got a program called Flexible Media or Object-Based Media. There's essentially a system of content production that produces dynamic experiences that change for the user in the situation that the user's in. Beyond that, they're also augmenting existing and creating new workflows to generate content. Salesforce has Einstein GPT, a little bit of a pretentious name, but pairs the capabilities of generative AI with real-time data. So this allows you to, or organizations to harmonize and unify all of a company's customer data and make decision-making fast. They also allow you to generate personalized content at scale and adapt to changing customer information and needs. So this is the NHS Cambridge University Hospital, and they have used AI to help specialists plan for radiotherapy treatment up to 2.5 times faster. So this ensures patients can get treatment sooner, cut time patients have to wait between referrals for radiotherapy, and improving the likelihood of a cure. The medical specialists had to draw around organs manually, which took hours and hours. And now this is done with generative AI, so they could focus on where they needed to most. So it's a relatively simple, boring automation that's potentially saving lives. We're increasingly seeing domain-specific large language models and AI applications. So this is BioNemo, again, a catchy name, but an LLM specifically trained for biology, so they can accelerate the creation of new proteins and therapeutics, as well as research in genomics, chemistry, biology, and molecular dynamics. So this is to create new proteins and biomolecules, accelerating the creation of new drugs. Google MedPalm 2 is specifically trained on medical data, and it's designed for use by clinicians, and clinicians are always meant to be in the loop. You can ask questions or upload images and get expert vetted clinician answers as a result. This example is someone asking to analyze a patient x-ray, and as you can see, the results and findings are here. It's a great example of augmenting deep expertise. The UNDP and Alan Turing Institute have developed something called the PPI tool, which is a policy priority interference tool. This combines pattern spotting capabilities and things like economic theory and social sciences to prioritize public spending and align it with the SDGs, which is the Sustainable Development Goals. There are a number of different parallel applications to help organizations streamline spending and ensure money is spent where it is needed most. Next example here is from Sixth Sense or Hope Tech. And we often think of AI in the digital world as almost invisible, but it's increasingly being used in our physical world. So this example is helping those that are visually impaired eliminate barriers for them. So it's a combination of wearable technology, so AI's vision capabilities, paired with haptic technology to create an experience of touch through motion and vibration. We're also seeing other examples like autism glass helping with autism related. People with autism relate and make sense of the world. So as you'd expect, it's not just non-profits and purpose-led social enterprises leveraging these tools. We've got huge organizations like Coca-Cola using them. They've normally got pretty high budget, and you might have seen their recent advertising campaign videos. But what's really interesting about their Create Real Magic campaign is that they're putting user-generated content in the hands of their end customers. So by doing that, they're harnessing the power of collective community creativity in fun and engaging ways. And they're also building a community around it. So this example was using DALL-E 2, OpenAI's image generator, to do that. Similarly, we've got examples like Barbie. It was pretty hard to miss the marketing splash. And they had lots of AI use cases below the surface. Some of them a little bit more interactive and fun. And as you can see here, this Barbie filter went live on TikTok. Everyone wanted to create themselves. But you can also insert yourself into iconic film scenes, like the one on the right. I'm not sure Ryan Gosling would be particularly impressed. But albeit it's a little bit of fun, right? And these technologies can unlock new and exciting ways to engage supporters if they're used in the right way. And with a monthly subscription and advancements in these tools, it's much more affordable and accessible than ever. Again, an example in the third sector is the Dogs Trust. They recently launched a charity project to raise money for who they call True Royalty, obviously dogs. So sorry, the cat lovers amongst us. They used AI DALL-E 2, I believe, in image generators to create portraits of King Charles Spaniels. Alongside these portraits, supporters have also released a collection of digital coronation memorabilia to raise money for thousands of dogs in the charity's care each year. And then the final example I'm going to show you is of WWF. So this was their Future of Nature campaign. So the UK are in the top 10% of the most depleted countries, nature depleted countries in the world. WWF created an in-person exhibition and digital campaign using AI. It was a series of AI-generated images using another platform called Midjourney and it's been created. He's been creating a romantic style, merging historic art with futuristic landscapes. And there was a physical exhibition in the Strand, but there was also a digital campaign right across the UK. So some of those are fun examples. Some of those are fun examples to engage supporters, partners, and internal teams, but there's numerous other applications beyond fundraising and marketing to drive systemic impact and change. I'm going to pass across Ed now to talk a little bit about where we see most value.
Thanks, Andy, and thanks for catching the awkward handover when I handed over to you before I was supposed to hand over to you. Seamless. Amazing. Cool. I want to summarize what Andy's just been through with some examples. We believe there are 8 places where there's key, clear value right now with using AI. So one is augmenting workflows and resources. So we saw this with the BBC, Crohn's and colitis. So this is about taking content and making it easier for people to access or making it easier to use in other forums, such as creating reports. Pattern spotting and prediction, so Parkinson's, Greenpeace, GSK, using this data analysis to unearth key insights. Who is it who's most likely to give the big donation, right? How are you going to get more income from certain user groups based on pattern matching? Problem identification and solving. There's been a lot of investment, especially IBM has invested a lot of money in this around infrastructure and making sure that the digital architecture that we all are reliant on is more resilient using AI systems. So can they identify problems before they emerge? If they do identify problems, can they get to the root cause more quickly to help us have seamless digital experiences? Fourth is around elevating creativity. So we just saw this with WWF and Dogs Trust. Visuals that wouldn't really have been feasible in the recent past are now accessible to us, right? We are able to create visual assets that would have just taken too much time, cost too much, and launch them to the general public to highlight our campaigns. Related to that is what we saw with Barbie and Coke, and I can sort of hear myself where I still in a charity where I'd be like, what on earth does Coca-Cola have to do with me? The truth is, though, that AI makes these personalized experiences more accessible. The barrier of entry has been lowered. And so we can actually now think about, okay, well, how can we give an individual experience to every person that we're working with, whether that's an end user, whether that's a donor who's interacting with it, whether it's an advocate who's trying to take our message out into the world. How can we work with them and give them personalized experience? Like show that these systems, again, relating to pattern matching, they can help with that decision making. They can give us data that wasn't previously accessible to us. They can make invisible things visible. How can they help with translation and learning? So Andy and I do a lot of learning and development stuff. Lisa talked about that, about some of the work we've been doing internally here, but we've been working with clients as well around training people, whether that's within innovation methods or whether it's with AI things. And large language models are extraordinarily powerful when it comes to learning. The way the models are built to be semi-random enables learning to be really quite powerful and is a really interesting space to be looking at. And the last one is accelerating innovation. So in the last 6 months, I was counting them just before this webinar. We have created 39 applications, so 39 web apps, websites, whatever you want to call them, things, objects to test a hypothesis. That's like probably a tenfold increase of where you would normally be in the past. If we go back a year, 2 years, you might have your frame a prototype, you might have something in Figma, you have some things in paper prototypes, you've got a presentation. We can now actually just test it in the browser, see what's working, see what's not working, really move much more quickly to deliver value to our customers. So what lies ahead? Well, the scary thing is that these models are the worst that they will ever be. Let that sink in. If you take nothing away from this webinar, just take this away. These models are never getting worse, right? And as I was talking about earlier with the Gartner image, when we pull things together, when we're putting different AI capabilities together, we're going to get increasing levels of creativity and capabilities out of them. Andy here can take over to talk to you about Mustafa Suleyman and Google DeepMind.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Ed. So you've introduced him. So Mustafa Suleyman was the founder of DeepMind. He's one of the leading experts in this space. And he talked about 3 waves. So the first wave is around classification. So we've essentially proved that machines can do that across various types of data. The next is around generation. So we've seen from the examples we've shared earlier that machines can now do that with human guidance, but it certainly can generate new content. And the final wave is wave 3 that we're starting to enter now. But it's what will the future of human-machine interaction look like, right? So what does the future interface look like? Is it clicking and typing like we currently do with ChatGPT and some of the other examples that I showed earlier? Or is it going to be around speaking? Is it embedding? We're increasingly seeing these tools being embedded into tools. Or is it potentially going to be invisible? I think it's a really interesting space now to understand how we're actually interacting with AI and what's the best way to do that. So a question we get a lot is how long before AI systems are as or more intelligent than humans? And this is essentially a definition of something called AGI, or artificial general intelligence. So we've taken 3 examples of leading AI companies here. So on the left is Anthropic, so the much more, you could argue, much more responsible organization built on the principles of constitutional AI. You've got OpenAI, which is spearheading a lot of the advancements that we see today, from ChatGPT, DALL-E, and then Google DeepMind as well, which kind of spearheaded a lot of the kind of technology alongside Google X. All of these organizations are backed financially by some huge corporate players with a lot of money, and they've all got vested interests. But that is their goal. And they're very open around that, right? So OpenAI has recently changed its values to say that AGI is their focus, and Anthropic has openly talked about that as well. So at the beginning of this presentation, or as Ed passed across to this, we said, what does the future hold? And I think any futurist or any good futurist will tell you that we cannot predict the future. We can only be ready for what might become. And we did some foresight work actually at the beginning of this year to understand what the future of AI might look like. And actually this is captured, encapsulated very well, some of the scenarios from Ethan Mollick, who's a professor at Wharton Business School. So he talks about number 1 being that's it, LLMs never get better. I think both Ed and I don't think that that's going to be an option, and given the progress we've seen in the last week alone. The next is around slow gains in ability, so incremental gains, followed by potentially exponential improvements, but no artificial general intelligence. And then the final is that we get to AGI. I think the answer is we don't know, so it varies hugely. So before last year, many experts put the time frame between 2035 and 2050. There's a chap called Ray Kurzweil. He's called the AI Oracle. Not sure I'd want that name, but he's by the tech bros and industry leaders because of his remarkable prediction accuracy. So he is estimating that it's going to be around 2029, and a lot of experts are agreeing. And then we've had people like Mo Gaudet, who's the former chief business officer of Google X, and he believes that because of the surprises and emergent properties that we've seen with a lot of these AI advancements, so like unexpectedly being able to learn Bengali, for example, he thinks it could be as early as 2027. I get a lot of comfort in Amara's law, so I used to work closely with IFTF prior to joining Torchbox, which is the Institute for the Future. Many believe it's a matter of time, but I think what we do tend to do as human beings is overestimate the effect of a technology in the short run and underestimate the effect in the long term. Many believe we need things like advancements in quantum computing before AGI is reality. There's nothing like doing a webinar whenever there's a dev update the week before. So OpenAI, hot off the press, has there's 2 things that we want to share with you today. The first is around custom GPTs, where you can create your own version of a chat GPT without any use of code. I'll show you a couple of examples of that in a moment. And the other is that OpenAI has recently released that their input tokens are 3 times cheaper for GPT-4 than they were before, which is going to allow a lot of organizations to use these technologies at a much lower cost. I talked about this before, but OpenAI has released what they're calling the GPT App Store, what many are calling the GPT App Store. So now you can create these GPTs and upload them. And again, no code required. You can just do this with natural language, which is absolutely incredible. I've been playing with, for the last couple of days since I got access. I've created everything from, I like a bit of sarcasm, but a grammar co-pilot that helped me with kind of writing, all the way through to a workshopper backed by neuroscience-led techniques. And these take me minutes to create, which is absolutely incredible. So I'm going to pass across to Ed now. He's going to talk a little bit about what you can do.
Amazing, great. Thanks, Andy. So what can you do? Well, one thing's clear, and Stanford Social Innovation agree with this. One thing is clear, we can't not engage with this, right? As social innovators, we almost have a responsibility to engage with this if it's going to increase our creativity, if it's going to increase our productivity, right? MIT researchers estimating 50% increase. Efficiency clearly isn't everything, but it is necessary for us to engage with this. This transformation is coming for us, whether we like it or not, and we need to deal with it. But we have to prepare for that. We have to prepare thoughtfully. There are 3 steps here, and this is a journey that we've been on as ourselves as Torchbox, but also some of the clients we're working with. We need to understand where we are as an organization and unpack the challenges and the opportunities that AI create for us. We then need to experiment to learn. Now, some people, when I talk about experiments, sort of think it's a bit of a bobbins, oh, just do a bit of a do something in the corner, there'll be a loud bang, and then we'll get on with the normal stuff. Experimentation is fundamentally important to this process and to understanding this transformation. We need to learn, and we need to identify quickly what we can scale that creates value for the people that we're working with. And finally, we need to create that culture where people can thrive. So that's learning and development, so they can adopt new tools safely, so they can understand where the edges of the tools are. What can you use Midjourney for versus what could you use GPT-4 for? What can you use any of the different names that I can throw around in this webinar? What are their weaknesses? What are their strengths? And building those capabilities and the guidance are very important to addressing this transformation in the coming months, coming years. As I mentioned, we've been working with a number of awesome clients to work through this ambiguity and uncertainty surrounding AI. And we've been working from a principle, right? We want to be responsible. So we need to move forwards, we need to engage, but we need to do it thoughtfully. So is it good enough for now? And is it safe enough to try has been the mantra that we've been using over the past few months. And it comes back to those 3 principles that I mentioned before, and I'm going to bring them back again because we think they're very, very important to have within your organization. And these are ours. Other people will have different ones, but it is important to have a framework that you're working with. So having that machine in the middle is very important for us. It always has to be humans that are making the decision-making around it. There needs to be clear governance, and there needs to be this responsible practice. So to kind of bring that to life, because that can seem lofty, airy, and a bit theoretical, I'm going to run through the experiments that we're doing with RNIB. So the experiments with RNIB were rooted in a clear problem. They have a helpline team. That helpline team is working with many different people who are phoning up for information. And the challenge was getting the right information at the right time to succinctly respond to the question they were being presented with in a way that could enable them to talk to lots of people. And the internal knowledge store that they had was great, but it was hard to navigate. And so they weren't getting to the information they wanted to. So the first experiment we had to take on was, is the data structured in such a way that it can work with large language models. I won't get into the geeky details about what structure or unstructured data looks like, but the good news was the structure was there, so we could keep going with the work that we were doing with them. The next bit was, could we get it into a format? Could we get it into a vector database that would enable a large language model to interact with it? And then finally, having validated those two things, could we synthesize and bring together this information in a way that was useful for the helpline team? And the response was overwhelming. It was, this is great, but I don't trust it. You know, I've heard all of these stories about how large language models hallucinate, how they create problems, how it might just be making stuff up, right? So the next step was, can we show the sources, and can we allow those sources to be linkable? So if you're on a phone call with somebody as the internal team, you can jump deeper into the information so you can share it with the user. We then needed to make sure that it was aligned with the Bragg guidelines, so that the way that the application was articulated met the guidelines of the RNIB. Obviously, accessibility is critically important for all charities, but RNIB live and breathe it in all of their digital experiences. And the final bit was to validate that it was working, right? We needed a feedback loop around the decision. We needed to validate that this was a better experience than the previous experience of using the internal knowledge tool. And we set a minimum requirement around that to have 4 more helpful responses coming from the large language model against any unhelpful one. And here you can see the application that we were using to do that. And the great thing is that in the last week, we've now rolled this out beyond the helpline team. So this is now an internal tool that anybody that are at RNIB can access and is built into their Wagtail content management system. And it will be super exciting to see the value that it's creating for them as an organization in the coming months. So cool, quickly, because I'm slightly conscious of time and really want to give space for people to ask questions. What now? Well, to come back to the point that Andy should have made earlier, but I stole from him because I got confused again with the handovers. These models are the worst they will ever be, right? They're not getting worse. The genie is not going back into that bottle. We can't sink our heads into the sand and hope that this all goes away. Machines can now do many things that only we could do before, that we kind of, held on to as being fundamentally human. It can see, it can solve problems. Machines can speak, hear, create content, and spot patterns. And terrifyingly, they can do many of these things better than we can in certain circumstances. They can exceed human performance. Now, we've obviously known this since the 90s, right? Kasparov was pretty good at playing chess, and Deep Blue beat him. But who cares about chess, really? And it's caught up, and it's now, actually able to do things that previously we believe we could do. And spotting patterns is one of the really interesting ones where I think it can do things better. But yeah, Andy and I were talking before this call about some of the workshops that large language models come up at, I mean, maybe they're not better than our workshops, but they're definitely, they're fascinating. It's fascinating just seeing the capabilities and exploring what it can do. And I think this is fundamental, because the takeaway from this is, how are you going to manage the AI transformation that is coming for you as an individual, you as a team, you as an organization, you as the domain that you're working within, with the people that you're helping, with the environment that you're protecting, with the new innovations that you're discovering. AI is changing everything. There was a webinar that we did maybe 3 or 4 months ago where I boldly said that AI isn't changing the rules of the game. I think AI, it's starting to change the rules of the game, and we need to engage properly and fully with the fact that it is transforming our ways of working, our culture, and how we're going to deliver value in the future. You need to start small with this. You need to experiment, and you need to learn from those experiments. So again, the word experiment sometimes makes people think, oh, it's just a small thing. So I mean, I've literally got start small on here. Start small doesn't mean that it isn't a big deal. Avalanches start with very small little pebbles, right? And they grow into something much, much bigger. This is going to be something that we need to repeat over and over again until we're creating the new value for our users. So to anchor back in to the way that we've been looking about this, about the fact that we need to be responsible, that we need to address ethics, that we need to make sure that what we're doing is safe and is delivering value. You need to come up with a framework. So, ours, it's always about people. We have clear guardrails around what we're doing, and we're making sure that everyone has the same skills and abilities that we as innovators have to approach this new future. We're obviously here to help. We within innovation are very good at dealing with complex and chaotic problems, and AI definitely fits within that. But also, our product design and build team is fundamentally important to helping with this human-centered design, building new things on new technology, and then our digital marketing team helping distribute these new ideas can all help you increase your message and everything else. We have set up AI office hours. So if you're interested in talking to Andy and I, please do book something in. This is a weird and wonderful new world that we are all inhabiting. So, no question is too small, no question is too large. When we're talking about transformation, that can terrify people, when actually all they want to know is, how do I get a, subscription for all of my team, sort of thing? We're happy to discuss all of them. As I said, it's small pebbles that are building up into a much larger piece. So please do get in touch. We would love to have a chat with you. But on that note, 7 minutes remaining. Are there some questions for Andy and I to take on?
There are. Thank you, Ed. Thank you, Andy, as well. Ed, it was like you were sped up on ×2 at the end.
Sorry, hopefully I was still vaguely articulate and, comprehensible.
I think so. I hope everyone else does. No, it was brilliant. So we do have some time, and we've got some good questions as well. So first of all, James has asked, Ed, you mentioned the importance of training staff on AI. Do you recommend generic training for all, specific training based on role or function, or free for all? Just go and learn for yourself.
I'm gonna be really annoying and be like a politician and pick option 4. All 3 of above. I wrote a blog post, or Andy and I wrote a blog post 3 weeks ago, maybe talking through the emergent strategy that we've been using. We have not come up with emergent strategy as a concept. We're using it from other thinkers and other innovators. But the idea being that you want a combination of all of those things, right? You want to be doing formal training, you want to be doing informal peer-to-peer training, and you want to be allowing people to explore in their own way, in their own world. Everybody approaches tools and working with tools in different ways, and it's really important that diversity is both celebrated, but also interesting things that are learned through that diversity is percolated through your organization and the people you're working with.
Yeah, just to build on that, Ed, as well, I think there are incredible free resources from Google, Microsoft for individual learning. But I think the people at Torchbox, and Lisa, maybe you can tell us as well, but people inside Torchbox really appreciate the time and space to have the discussions and really understand how this impacts their individual roles, which you often overlook, right? The emotional side of this journey, which is really important to give that time and space to talk about.
Yeah, I think I would just, if I'm allowed to build on what Andy said, I think that fear factor is really important, because there is that anxiety, right, when we talked about it. Also allowing people time and space gives the opportunity of seeing those secondary or tertiary, second or third level outcomes that may not necessarily be desirable by adopting certain things. And so learning is about knowing what to do as much as what not to do when we're thinking about technologies.
Brilliant, thank you. Yeah, we've all had a bit of AI therapy here, I think, while we go through the process. So we've got a question from Amanda. Are we talking about experimentation with procured and licensed tools when you're thinking about IP and GDPR? And Andrea's built on that as well and said that would love more attention to security and data masking PPI before entering it into ChatGPT or others.
Yes, I mean, all of the big players are aware of how big a barrier this is to, well, for adoption across, across the world, right, across the board. All of them have published their security protocols and their privacy protocols. All of them have now, OpenAI was the last of them to indemnify people who are using their product against copyright claims. So OpenAI now says, along with Microsoft and everybody else, that were someone to challenge you over a copyright claim, that wouldn't be on me, Ed Baldry, it'd be on, you know, GPT-4 and, but by extension, OpenAI. So they are working very hard to make it safe to use for organizations and to feel that they've got some security or sense of security around putting in data. That said, one of our earliest experiments was an app that we called Redact and Reduce, and the Redact was the important bit because we didn't want to be putting sensitive data into it. You know, we talked about Samson accidentally leaking information they didn't want to. Every organization is different. Every organization will have a different risk profile around how much or how little data they're able or willing to give. We obviously sit with, you know, within frameworks and regulations like GDPR, like the Ombudsman here in the UK, information commissioners, we need to abide by, and we need to be conscious of all of those pieces when we're interacting with large language models.
Thank you. We can send some more links to it with more references and guidance for this as well after the event. Ken asks, will hallucination ever be solved, or will AI always be human-like and make stuff up when it doesn't know?
It's getting better. I mean, so it is hard. I wouldn't bet. It's a very hard question to answer because both futures seem entirely viable, and I think both futures need to be considered when we're thinking about tools. So one of the reasons for the machine always being in the middle in the work that we're doing, right? Yeah, the RNIB app is a perfect example of this. A helpline team member is writing a question to GPT 3.5. GPT 3.5 responds, and the helpline staff member is doing something with that information. There is a check at both ends of it. And the reason for that is because of the fear of hallucination, of it making stuff up. There is lots of work, whether that's Anthropic's work to help improve the quality of their large language model by the large language model self-learning, whether it's reinforcement learning that OpenAI is doing to try and reduce hallucinations. And certainly GPT-4 from a reasoning perspective is substantially better compared to where GPT 3.5 was last year. And the fact that it now can interact with the internet, it's starting to become less of a problem than it previously was.
Brilliant. Thank you, Ed. I appreciate that we are at 11 o'clock. So if you do want to drop off now, I've got a couple more questions as well that I still like to ask Andy and Ed, but I will be following up, as I say, with a link to the deck and any of the resources. But if you're sticking around, Amy would like to know, are there any really great UK charity examples of digital assistance you admire? So beneficiary facing, not internal.
Sorry, say that again. So I missed.
Are there any great UK charity examples of digital assistance for beneficiary facing, not internal facing?
Yeah, so that's interesting. So there has been some examples. So I think the Sarah one is closest. We had another example, Ed, you're going to have to remind me, that I had in the presentation previously. Girl effect.
Girl effect.
They didn't use large language model generative AI capabilities. It was more traditional AI capabilities. But the Girl effect had a chatbot called Big Sis, and that was an incredible example. And again, it was vetted by health experts. And again, because of the challenges with large language models at the moment and this kind of misinformation, we're not currently advocating for that to be kind of beneficiary focused. It's always been internal. So the RNIB example we showed was definitely for internal staff, where you had an expert checking that information. But again, that doesn't mean that you can't create incredible chatbots with more traditional AI techniques.
Yeah, thank you. And what are the dangers of using free platforms for governance?
Using free, as in free to use platforms like accessing GPT 3.5. This isn't quite directly answering the question, but hopefully it might do. All of the large language models that are available for free have far fewer capabilities than those that you need to pay for. One of the things that we've talked about in previous webinars is that an annoyance of large language models and the AI world we're moving into is that it's more expensive than our previous understanding of digital, right? Digital previously basically didn't have a cost of goods associated with it. GPT-4, Anthropic 2, I can't remember what model they've just put behind their enterprise grid, but they have a level of reasoning that is much, much higher than those models that are free. Internally here at Torchbox, we're definitely advocating for everybody to be using GPT-4 rather than GPT 3.5 because of the enhanced reasoning capabilities. And if you're thinking about governance, then I think that's valid. GPT 3.5 and the cheaper models work really well when you're asking it just to choose between different data points or to synthesize existing pieces of content into a contiguous piece of content. It's not great if you're actually asking it a hard to respond to question. That's where risk of hallucination and overconfidence comes in. Andy, does that seem reasonable?
Yeah,
does that answer the question?
Yeah. I think so.
And finally, Rebecca just asked how they can keep, how everyone can keep awareness of new developments. What are the best sources of AI news? And I know you showed Ethan earlier, which we all follow, but maybe that's another thing we could include in the follow-up email is where you get your latest AI news from so that we can all copy you.
That's a great question from about 100 different experts. No, we try and keep it quite diverse. From Tim McGeebrew, who was an ex-Google ethicist for AI, all the way through to some incredible platforms like the Neuron, which gives you kind of an overview from a technology standpoint. So what we can do after this is maybe send a few links for those. I don't want to list them all, but there's some incredible people to follow, and it's good to keep that broad to see both ends of the spectrum, right? So you can get that balance view.
Yeah. Awesome.
To build on that, sorry if I can't, like that's definitely true, and Andy and I are obsessed with like a diversity and plethora of different audience, different people. I think it's not necessarily necessary to fall into the minutiae of AI to understand how it's transforming things. I think referring to sort of popular tech websites, so The Verge, TechCrunch, those sorts of spaces, even the Guardian's tech section, you will hear about the important bits, right? There is a lot of noise on Twitter, on Reddit, LinkedIn, everywhere else that the whereas I think relying on larger media to find the news in this instance could potentially be more helpful to filter it through. We've all got busy lives and need some filtering on the information that's coming through.
Yeah, I forget that we're not all immersed in this, right? To the same extent.
Brilliant. Thank you everybody for coming and who's stuck around for that little question section at the end as well. And thank you, Ed and Andy. Hopefully we'll see you all again for a webinar soon.
Thanks all. See you later.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.